depending on where you're connecting from. My name is Loredana Scuto, and I'm a UCN Urban Program Officer based in our office in Bonn, Germany. And I have been working with the UCN for around the past couple of years for the implementation of urban NbS, or in general, urban biodiversity projects, and also development of knowledge products. UCN has a long-standing history of work in rural and peri-urban ecosystems, and therefore we wanted to start applying our knowledge and our projects also in cities. Having said that, I'll start sharing my screen. Please let me know if there's any issue with it. I'll put it on. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. And now it's in presenter mode, so it looks good.
Perfect. Thanks. So I thought I'll try to be quick in general so that we can have more time for Q&A, but just to give a brief overview of what a UCN is and what we do. We are the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and we have been around for around 75, 76 years. We are the world's largest and most ever global environmental network because we bring together over 1,400 members. And we have states, subnational governments, indigenous peoples organizations, and NGOs. So we bring everyone together and we meet every 4 years during our World Conservation Congress, where we have our members and our commissions that bring together over 15,000 volunteer scientists to work towards our conservation agenda. And in order to implement our policies, to implement our projects, and also to develop knowledge products, we have our secretariat. Right now, I think we're way over 900. I think we're around 1,000 or 1,100 staff scattered around 50 countries. We are pretty known for mainly, I think, protected areas, forest restoration, and NbS, but we're increasingly working in cities and in urban ecosystems in general. The momentum around urban and in general urban dimensions of nature conservation started some years ago because we were asked by our decision-making body, our UCN Council, to start incorporating urban and to start including cities in our work. That also was cited by the inclusion of some national governments in our membership, and therefore that meant that cities and in general provinces or regions had decision-making power, and they could also work alongside states and NGOs and indigenous peoples to shape our conservation agenda. Internally, we also have different impact targets and different commitments towards urban biodiversity conservation. And probably the most remarkable one is the Marseille Manifesto that has the commitment to expand universal access to green spaces in cities. In general, 100 cities representing 100 million citizens by 2025. It's quite an ambitious target, but we want to work with the rest of our union and the rest of our partners to achieve this objective. So in terms of urban NbS, I'm sure you're all familiar with the global standard for NbS that UCN has produced some years ago. We have been working on how to translate it into cities in general. But before maybe delving into the standard and the urban nature indexes, we operated a stock take. So we took stock of what UCN had produced in the past 75 years, and what can be applied in cities is the result of our initial analysis. So we released this UCN Urban Toolbox as a catalog of all the UCN tools and knowledge products that can be implemented in cities. And the main feature of this toolbox is this decision key. And that is extremely helpful because it's already divided into different project phases, starting from assessment and going through planning, design, implementation, and monitoring. And this is particularly helpful for those who want to start implementing NbS as well. So, for instance, if you're at the assessment phase of your project or your solution, you can respond to specific questions, and then you're directed towards the tool and mechanism that best fits your needs and challenges. And in the context of assessing and planning the NbS, we have different knowledge products that can be applied. We have, for instance, the STAR that works on abating species threats in specific ecosystems. We have our urban protected areas guidelines, and of course also the global standard on NbS. So in the context of designing NbS and planning NbS, we always encourage developers to adhere and be aligned with our global standard for NbS. Again, I won't maybe delve too much into this because it's one of our one of best known knowledge products. But for you to know, we have 8 criteria with, I think, around 28 indicators that, if applied, can make sure that this NbS also address societal challenges through nature. We also released a couple of publications, one on the first assessment of urban NbS in the Mediterranean. And also we have a first set of 10 case studies from China, and a couple of them were implemented in urban. So this could be a very initial tool that can be implemented for planning and design. Together with different others, we have, for instance, the Making Nature City Toolkit, which was developed by the San Francisco Estuary Institute, SFEI, that provides a very practical guidelines on what to design and what to implement to maximize urban biodiversity in cities. Here, as you can see on the side, we have these 7 key landscape elements that, if applied, of course, in the right place at the right time, can really maximize urban biodiversity for human health. And we were partnering with SFEI for the development of the Making Nature City Toolkit. You can have this toolkit online, accessible, and also for the development of sector-specific guidelines on this Making Nature City framework, let's say, especially in terms of sports infrastructure, venues, and events, because we also wanted to fill that niche and make sure that big sports events such as the Olympics or the World Cups can contribute to nature and biodiversity conservation. Another tool that can be used for especially planning, but mainly more implementing of NbS is our tools on ecosystem restorations in cities. IUCN is the secretariat for the restoration barometer that measures the commitment and the contribution of different countries towards the bond challenge related to forest landscape restoration. And we noticed, especially in the 2022 report, that an increasing number of countries have started reporting on their restoration activities in cities and in general in urban ecosystems. And that's pretty exciting because it means that different countries, especially in Africa and Latin America, have started to realize the potential of ecosystem restoration in cities, and also the potential of urban NbS. And then from more of a monitoring and reporting point of view, we have developed our flagship knowledge product on urban biodiversity, which is the IUCN Urban Nature Indexes. The indexes were released in May 2023, and they represent a flexible methodological framework to measure cities' ecological performances. It's particularly relevant for municipalities because through the application and the assessment of different indicators, they can first of all assess baselines. And that's very important also for the planning and design of urban NbS. Without baselines, we really don't know where to act and how to act, and also which sort of targets we want to achieve. So that was particularly relevant for that. But its main role is also to monitor progress. So the structure of the uni revolves around these 6 themes that measures different aspects of urban nature, and these 30 indicators. Since it's a flexible methodology, we do not ask municipalities to report to all 30 indicators. We just ask at the very beginning of the assessment the level of capacity, the allocated budget, so we understand the needs and opportunities derived by its application in the specific municipalities, and then we suggest a specific number of indicators to calculate. And we have already one city that has finished the assessment, which is Berlin in Germany, and we have Guatemala City and Mexico City currently at the latest stages of its assessment. And especially for Berlin, which comes from, let's say, a high-income country, and it's has quite some resources allocated to urban biodiversity, the uni was also relevant for them to establish some baselines. In Latin America, for instance, in both Guatemala and Mexico, it was relevant because they had some data, but it was not consistent, it was not historic, and maybe they also needed some support in taking stock of the level of urban nature in the city. And therefore, from there, they can start monitoring trends and setting targets accordingly. And in order to do so, we developed a web platform where cities can go register and start assessing the uni. And just to give an overview of what you can have inside, this is a snapshot of 2 of the indicator topics that were calculated by the city of Berlin. In here, you see, for instance, in the case of light pollution, they didn't really have historic data. And therefore, as you can see here, the score is based on measured. They only have data and values for the year 2021. And this is going to be their baseline for future years. Well, for instance, here in water withdrawal, you can see that they had historic data, and therefore, while including this data on the platform, it was automatically generated this chart that provides already a trend. And here you see the score already, decreasing trend observed, and that means that there are more sustainable trends of water withdrawal. Again, the platform is publicly available. We encourage municipalities to lead the application of the uni because they are the ones that most of the time need more an overview of urban nature so that they can start implementing policies and setting targets. But we also encourage the involvement of communities. Most of indicator topics can be assessed through citizen science, and also by publishing these data online. There's a little bit more environmental transparency and accountability given to municipalities because everyone can see the results, everyone can see the data sets and the sources, and therefore it's let's say it's a win-win because these data have been endorsed by municipalities and therefore by local authorities, and therefore can also be either endorsed by local communities, gaps can be filled, but they also be contested. Of course, we encourage already from the beginning the use of citizen science so that we don't have any issue later on, but that's also up to the municipality or the agency that has been appointed by the municipality to assess the urban nature indexes. And therefore, we also encourage the application of the uni for the implementation of urban NbS because it can also be helpful to set baselines at the very beginning of the projects or the intervention. And then after 2-3 years, we can have a snapshot of the positive impacts and the outcomes of NbS or in general any urban biodiversity project, not only at a city scale, but in general in the overall municipality and city. So yeah, that was pretty quick. This is my contact and the contact of my supervisor. And we are really open to have any sort of discussion related to our projects, knowledge products, or any activities that we can do on urban biodiversity. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Loredana. We have some time for questions now, about 10 minutes or so. So if you'd like to ask a question, please just unmute yourself or raise your hand virtually, and I'll call on you. David.
Yeah, hi. I am interested in if the IUCN issues open calls for people to work on future projects together with the IUCN.
So we don't, sometimes we open calls or expression of interest, but most of the time we work mainly based on on interaction. So if you're interested in developing specific projects, you can reach out to us, and we're open to fundraise together or to implement specific projects. If partners already have funds, they can reach out to us and we can understand how to collaborate. But in general, it's way better to just reach out to us for specific projects already in mind, or to develop some specific tenders or applications.
So I guess that means that you're open to working on Horizon Europe projects and the like.
So in terms of Horizon projects, we have our office in Brussels that deals with and leads the applications. So you can reach out to them. They are the ones that are also eligible to proceed with these sort of applications. But we are involved in a number of EU-funded projects.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And if not right now, we'll likely have some time after Weiqi's question time at the end. So you can ask that then as well. All right, last call. Thanks so much, Loredana.
Thank you.
Okay, and then Weiqi, whenever you're ready to share your screen.
All right. Thanks, Tara. So can you guys see my slides?
Yes.
All right. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, maybe. So thanks for inviting me to give this talk. So I'm going to talk about trees as nature-based solution for heat mitigation and adaptation in cities. And this work by some of my colleagues in my lab and me. So we know that cities are warmer than their surrounding regions, and particularly, combined with global warming, we are expecting more frequent and intense hot extremes in cities. Because the synergistic interaction between climate change and urban heat island effects. Actually, there are quite some studies showing that there is a very clear trend that more extreme events will occur in urban areas. Because there are more and more people live in cities, and particularly like in countries, in cities, in countries in Asia and like in Africa, that are the hot spots, for future urbanization. And we can see, with more people live in cities and with the increased frequency and the longer duration, and also intensified urban extreme. So cities are in some way, cities are extremely vulnerable to extreme heat. This is particularly true. I mean, think about population aging in globally and particularly in cities. But from here we can see actually, there are quite a lot, extreme heat events, or sometimes we or we can call them heat waves. Like for example, in the year of 2003, there's a really big heat wave in Europe, and also in the even earlier in the 1995, there is Chicago hit by a big heat wave. So like in China last year, started from the very early June, and there are more than 40 days for the maximum temperature was higher than 33 degrees. So it's really become a urgent threat to the quality of life in urban areas. But according to the study of Borden and Carter back in 2008, we can see in the United States, actually among all the nature hazards, actually heat and drought, is the top one that caused excessive death. But at the same time, it's not that well recognized as a threat to human life. So it is called a major but silent killers. Because the adverse impact to many aspects. So really, many of the cities are now take actions to fight against climate change and extreme heat, in particular. So we can see there, for example, the so-called, many of the cities use urban green infrastructure, or particularly urban tree canopy as one of the nature-based solutions for urban heat mitigation and adaptation. Tree actually now in many of the cities, urban trees has been one of the most proposed nature-based solutions or mitigation tools, around the world, regardless of the climate context. Trees for cooling actually through two major ecological processes. One is evapotranspiration. The other one is shading. In addition to cooling, the reason urban trees has been used as one of the most widely used nature-based solution, because in addition to cooling, trees also provide lots of other benefits. For example, like reduce, improve some of the benefits to physical and mental health. Also for stormwater management, and also like for biodiversity maintenance, etc. And that's why cities globally, like in Beijing, we had 2 turns of the Meaning Tree campaign, and of course in many other cities, like in New York City, the Meaning Tree initiative, and like in Los Angeles, and there are many of the cities use urban trees to adapt to climate change and to fight against the other ecological and environment challenges. But we know that cities have very limited space and the resources for greening. We need land for all kinds of other green infrastructures, for building schools, building housing for houses to housing people, etc. So how and also heat disproportionately affect different urban population. Usually there are lots of studies showing that usually people, the urban poor and people of color being more exposed and have, but at the same time have limited capacity or resources to for heat mitigation and adaptation. So well to plan, and so that we can maximize the social and ecological benefits of urban trees. It's a really important question to address. That is, understanding who is the most vulnerable, where they live, and where they have equal access to benefits of trees for cooling, especially, for those tree planting programs. It's really crucial starting point for prioritizing urban heat intervention in planning and policy. So we ask one key question, that is, in what physical and social conditions does the cooling capacity of trees have the greatest environmental and social impact? Specifically, we propose two hypotheses. So the first is increasing the urban tree canopy will have a greater cooling effect in harder neighborhoods that have fewer trees. Also, we hypothesize that the presence of socially vulnerable people predicts locations in which trees will have greater cooling effects. So to test the hypothesis, we developed an indicator which we call cooling efficiency. Basically, it is the magnitude of temperature reduction associated with 1% increase of urban tree canopy cover. So we asked two questions. Does the cooling efficiency of urban tree canopy vary across space at different, among different cities and also within a city? And also, from a social ecological perspective, how to maximize cooling benefits. That is, whether or not we planting trees in the right location, that we can gain more socially and ecologically. And this slide shows you clearly that, from panel A to B, we can see with the increase of urban tree canopy, the land surface temperature that derived from satellite imagery, reduced. And also, if you look into the two neighborhoods with different tree canopies, the air temperature are quite different. And here are some of the results. Here I'm showing you how the cooling efficiency of urban trees varies among cities. Here is a case study using about 100-ish cities in the United States, and from the maps and the figures, we can see that cooling efficiency was higher in the southwestern cities, especially in those hot and dry biomes, like in Phoenix and in some of the cities in California. And also, if you look in the left side of the figures, you can see that climatic context, including air temperature, humidity, and the wind speed, have a strong impact on the cooling efficiency. But it's in a nonlinear way. We can see there's a clear threshold, which can have an important implication. For example, like for temperature, we can see with the increase of temperature at the very beginning, the cooling efficiency increased first. But then when temperature reach certain point, we can see there's a sharp turning that greatly reduce the cooling capacity. That means in those cities, in those very hot days, the trees may not work really effectively for cooling. So that is, extreme high air temperature would result in the decrease of cooling efficiency in most cities. I think this slide shows you, so I just showed you the variation of a spatial variation of a cooling efficiency among cities. And this slide is showing you the cooling efficiency, various, in space actually within a city. That is, in different locations. If we plant trees in different locations in the city, we will have different cooling capacity or cooling benefits of trees. So we can see that cooling efficiency tend to be greater in locations with fewer open tree canopy and higher LST. So as we can see here from the figures here, in general, the cooling efficiency first decrease with the increase of open tree canopy, and then become relatively stable, slow down after the percent cover tree reaching a certain threshold. So this kind of because we know the exact location, so we can this can help us to identify and prioritize locations for tree planting, so that we can achieve better cooling. If we look into, if we also consider taking a social ecological perspective to consider the income, race, education, attainment, and of the urban residents, so we can see urban population with more people of color, lower income, and less education tend to live in harder neighborhoods that have less tree canopy cover. And this is quite consistent. The result is quite consistent, across the 38 largest American cities at the national scale. More importantly, we can see, as we just showed you, trees planted in harder and the locations with fewer trees tend to have greater cooling capacity. But here I'm showing you trees planted in harder, more socially vulnerable neighborhoods can achieve greater cooling benefits. That is, increasing tree canopy in these neighborhoods will meet the greatest need for cooling and also achieve greater cooling capacity, creating social and ecological win-wins. Again, because it's spatially explicit, so we can develop tools that can help us to spatially prioritize the potential heat mitigation strategies and intervention. That is, plant the trees where it's most needed socially and ecologically. And that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about. With that, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Weiqi, I believe there is a question that David had asked in the chat about cooling efficiency. David, I don't know if you still have that question.
Let me see. So is that put in the box?
Yeah, it was the question about humidity. Is that relative humidity?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
So you mean the cooling efficiency, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's related to, so both so the three dominant factors affecting cooling efficiency are temperature, humidity, and the wind speed. As in terms of the climatic background.
Can I ask you another question? The
Sure.
evapotranspiration from the tree itself, does that affect the cooling efficiency as the tree transpires water into the atmosphere?
Yeah, I think I think why the cooling efficiency vary in space, as I showed slides, where cooling efficiency tend to be greater in harder neighborhoods. I think one of the reasons is because with the before reaching the threshold, with the increase of temperature, many of the trees tend to increase to have greater evapotranspiration rate. That's why they have greater cooling capacity. But this really depends on what kind of tree, because some of the trees may shut off their stamens, when the temperature, so it also depends on the tree species. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Good. All right. So have you developed a like a map for which trees to use in what kind of situations?
That's a really good question. It's one of the ongoing project. So because on the one hand, trees can provide cooling efficiency, cooling benefits. We call ecosystem service. But at the same time, with extreme heat, some of the trees may can survive, but some of the trees may does even can really suffering and even cannot survive. So it's really important. I mean, to consider the future climate change, and to see to select the right tree species.
Yeah.
And that is also space dependent, because as I just showed you, there are quite large variation in space in terms of both temperature and relatively humidity.
Well, hopefully people will start developing guidances for trees and which trees to use where for urban cooling.
Yeah, there are some studies like I remember a few years ago there is a paper look into the they developed different scenarios, and there's one in the worst scenario about like 70% of the trees in California we're really suffering and will not survive on that scenario, global warming scenario. Yeah, so that's a really big problem. Like the streets just outside of our campus, I noticed that the trees planted a few years ago pretty much all died last year, because most likely due to the heat wave last June. Yeah, so wow. It's a bigger challenge. Yeah.
And it looks like we have another question from Sabrina.
Hi. Yeah, I had a question. So just to follow on from the last bit of the conversation you were just having, UC Davis has been undertaking for several years now with the US Forest Service a project called Climate Ready Trees. I'll drop a link into the chat after this, but that's exactly what that is essentially. But it's focused on California and the US. So but my question actually is whether you have thought about sort of multiple objectives for urban trees, and how might you sort of balance cooling efficiency with something like, say, the desire a city might have for an urban food orchard?
That's a very good question. The first, thank you for offering the information. I will check that out. And also that's a really good question. I think because as a trees provide different kinds of ecosystem services, and as you just mentioned, some of the ecosystem services might be just have synergistic effects, but some of them may have trade-offs. So I think it's a really comprehensive question, and it's really important to consider different kinds of services provided by trees. And also, I think it's really important to consider the reality, the social reality, because, for example, in Shenzhen, we did some survey, and there, like in some of the urban villages in Shenzhen, I think that's the really hot locations, and most people living there, I think they have less resource and capacity to for heat mitigation and adaptation. But also in those locations, there really no place to plant trees because it's so dense built. So I think it's there are lots of things to really consider, and yeah, I think a very comprehensive or holistic perspective is really important. Yeah.
Do you know specifically of any studies that have tried to combine sort of the heat mitigation aspect and sort of food and fruit production by any chance?
That's a very good
Looking for
question.
some.
I really don't know, but I think it should be, right? That's a really good question. I think I will check that out. I think that's a very interesting, important question. Yeah, but it's not right now. It's not like something coming up to my mind. Yeah, sorry.
No problem, but I'm going to follow up with an email to you.
Thank you.
We have another question in the chat, but before we get to that, I just have a quick one. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, so heat is very close to me. And I live in a neighborhood where we have a lot of foot traffic during the day, and it's just so hot and we don't have that many trees. And I'm just wondering, what is the holdup as far as you know with implementation of this? It would make sense to me that, okay, we have this information and we can just go and just plant the trees and, just make sure they're watered and everything. But it seems like there's a real holdup there. And I'm just wondering what your opinion is on that.
Okay. That is also very a good question. It just reminded me when I was at Phoenix at the campus of Arizona State University. I saw people they do not walk in straight. They just follow the trees. To follow the shade. It's really interesting. I think yeah, I think planning is also very comprehensive thing, and sometimes can be really complicated, as we all think. Maybe it's easy to just put on to plant the trees here and there, but I think it's really because there's so many different stakeholders involved. Not all the people like trees actually. So I found it's relatively easy in those, for example, the public right of ways, or like in China in cities, like along the streets, something. But it's getting much more difficult if if we want to plant trees in those private, so the residential areas, etc. So and because in addition to the benefits, there are also costs to the trees. So I think and also like I once noticed because they're trees, they also attract birds. So the birds will drop like the things on the cars. So they're they're just the people may see trees in different ways, but I think it's quite complicated. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. We do have a question from Hannah in the chat. Hannah, if you'd like to speak up and ask. If you're still here.
Okay. My question is, if there's been a study, and I'm sure this has been already addressed a little bit, if there's been a study on monoculture versus biodiverse ecosystem of trees, or having kind of a more, I guess, endemic tree species, and if that is kind of more overall effective than bringing in like non-native trees. And I apologize if there's a lot of background noise.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think they're quite I think there are quite a few papers try to address the question you just asked. But in reality, I just noticed because particularly for street trees, because the environment is really harsh, so they can, I think, those trees, there are not that many species can really survive along the streets, and also there are also because there are some limitations, there are lots of consideration, constraints should be considered, for what kind of trees should be selected. So I think at least in, like for example, in Beijing, not that many species, planted in, for example, in streets, but more and more, there are more and more calls, really to consider, those for other, for biodiversity, to try to better support biodiversity, and also there at least like for those, recently in Beijing we had quite a large number of parks, those small sized parks. Really, the number of native species and the percentage of native species that was selected, it's they put some regulations like that. So it's I would say they definitely they pay more and more attention to that.
Thank you. That's really interesting. For reference, the reason I ask is because I am based in New York City in the US, and we get a lot, just because of our history, we get a lot of non-native trees here, and bringing back kind of our, native flora is a huge issue, especially because we deal with a lot of non-native species in general. So it's just interesting to kind of see this difference.
Yeah, it's the same. Like as what I know, because we did some survey in Beijing and Shenzhen. Like in Beijing, more than half, I think it's 53% are all non-native species, and also very much similar like proportion of non-native species in Shenzhen. For all kinds of different reasons, historical reasons. But I think people more and the urban planners and and managers more and more realize the importance of to introduce native species. Yeah, in recent campaigns.
I just wanted to throw in there, though, one challenge is, for example, in the Los Angeles area, we need cooling, but most of it isn't what I would call tree habitat. So unless it's a riparian corridor, the native trees may not be the trees that are going to provide the other services that we want, especially in very arid or even desert areas. So like LA, Las Vegas, Phoenix. There's just not a lot of native trees to choose from because it's not forest naturally.
I agree. Yeah.
And we can do one or two more questions. I think, David, your hand is up for a new question.
Yeah, think it would be interesting to look at the studies that have already been done and maybe revise and do a new study that looks at the connection between the value of property and the planting of trees. And especially if you can if one can find studies that show a difference or an increase in the value of a piece of property based on the planting of new street trees in a city. And I would think that the value of property, at least in the United States, goes up if there's trees in the street or if new trees are planted in contrast to streets where there's no trees.
Yeah. Actually, my advisor, my PhD advisor, Zhou, he has done some very interesting. He done analysis, and that shows actually, as you just mentioned, trees really help increase the property value, and also the same like in Beijing and Shenzhen. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But again, the downside to that is gentrification.
Yeah.
Not always good to raise property values,
Mm-hmm.
especially in housing poor cities.
Yeah, I think that's why we always need to consider, some of the trade-offs and also really need to take a social ecological perspective to really, and it's important to consider, the socially marginal people. Yeah.
Any final questions for Weiqi or Loredana? All right. Thanks so much. Oh wait, we have, yeah. Okay, not a question. But thank you so much, Loredana and Weiqi. These were both really interesting presentations and conversations to have on those. So I will be making, if you could just send your slides to me, I'll make those available on our webinars page, as well as the recording from this webinar. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you all.